grew up in northern New Jersey, and I could see the towers in Manhattan. I watched them fall, and I watched them smolder for 2, 3 months afterwards.
September 2001 changed the world. Its ripple effects stretched out in every direction, from that tragic epicenter to the families still grieving, to the millions whose lives were shaped by what happened that day. For many in my generation, mostly college grads trying to figure out what we were going to do with our lives, everything shifted course. For me, it crystallised my decision to become a diplomat and ultimately join the military. And I wasn't alone. Across the US in particular, there was a surge. Thousands stepped forward to serve in the military, in law enforcement and in government. One of them was my guest today, John. He went on to spend 23 years in the US Secret Service, 15 of them in special operations. He's protected presidents and global leaders, secured volatile zones and planned operations most of us will never hear about. But that's not what this conversation is about. It's a conversation about ego and humble leadership, about diplomacy under pressure, about working with, not against, different cultures and understanding the human dynamics behind the mission. And it's about what happens when your identity has been wrapped around a badge or a title for so long, and then one day it's not. So let's get into it. So John, thank you so much for joining me today on the pod.
My pleasure.
So can you take us back to the beginning? What made you join the Secret Service? Did you join as soon as you graduated, or were you out in the big bad world beforehand? What was the trigger?
I was a happy-go-lucky kid. I graduated college not knowing what I wanted to do. I still don't, many years later, but I'm working on it. And I was working at the university, still partly going for advanced degree. 9/11 happened. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I could see the towers in Manhattan. I watched them fall, and I watched them smolder for 2, 3 months afterwards. So I put my applications in for a whole bunch of stuff. The service scooped me up first and quickly.
If I may, what do you think the service saw in you? Why do you think they snapped you up so quickly?
There was probably a hiring push. My background was clean. I didn't have much of anything. I wrestled, I went to school, liked pizza and Star Wars, and it was easy. The background investigation for me was probably easy. I had some life experience where I worked. I was about 25, 26 when I got hired. I did a lot of biomedical stuff, and it showed that I was a little bit intelligent, right? Just intelligent enough where I could join and go on whatever path I needed to go on. And then afterwards, I went to training, and I was out and running around the world, adventures everywhere, meeting Jen in Egypt, not knowing that we met in Egypt.
I know. So we discovered not that long ago that we crossed paths.
Yeah, that was around it was between 2012 and 2014 during the elections in Egypt.
Yes. And you were part of President Jimmy Carter's close protection team, correct?
I was one of the people there. Yeah.
And I became the embassy expert by accident rather than design on election systems. And that brought me into President Carter's orbit. We came to Cairo and we had a one-to-one with him. And you were in the room.
This room probably many times, and we met years later.
Yeah.
I don't know how we even had the conversation that we were both there at the same time.
No, me neither. What do you remember about that trip?
That we left very abruptly.
Okay, because there was a little bit of instability around about that time, I guess.
Yeah, a little. You've toned it down a little bit, but there was instability there, yeah.
I think when we organise visits of VIPs as an embassy official, we go through the full range of risk scenarios, from predicted ones that they miss their plane or the meeting gets cancelled, or right the way through to complete wild card scenarios. Is that how you would plan as well when you're looking at a kind of close protection scenario? Before you go, thinking about all the possible risks, and so you've got a plan in place when political instability comes knocking on your hotel door?
There is a plan. There's always a plan. There's a systematic way that we go about. I was there for about a month. It was interesting because every single time we travel somewhere, especially overseas, it presents us always a unique set of challenges. They're not always the same. I would say if it is the same, it's kind of a boring trip. And that one specifically had a lot of obstacles because we had to go to a lot of secure locations. He had a lot of inside, and he had previous relationships with a lot of these places. And that still it makes it difficult. So in order for us to be able to accomplish everything, we have to negotiate the terms of us existing in those spaces. Those, I think, are like the challenges that we have every time we go. And it's a testament to the men and women that are in the service, because the more successful people end up displaying that diplomacy and that resolve in order to get their jobs done, the requirements done.
I remember being in New York for the opening of the UN General Assembly, and our hotel was just chock full of officials and VIPs. And I remember waiting to get into the elevator to go to my floor, and I was sort of bundled out the way because a US VIP, I don't know who it was being ushered in, and the Secret Service agents just sort of elbowed me out the way, and away they went. This was my point: is it must be quite easy and tempting because you've got the squiggly earpiece and the badge just to bully your way around. But as you alluded to, actually, the skill is, even under tension, to diplomat your way around it, because that's going to be a bit more impactful and effective.
It's the best agents are the ones that do use that. I apologize for the elbow of whoever it was.
I mean, it was super exciting. I was just very excited. My first time in New York, first time at the UN that I dreamed about since I was a kid. You know, I was cool with being bundled out of the way.
Most of the people don't even realize that the Secret Service agent or officer has done his or her job because they're using diplomacy, because they are not trying to be the main effort. Obviously, if you were trying to cause harm to the person that was walking, that's a different story. But just generally, it's almost as if the best agents are the ones that you don't even realize what they do. You have no idea that they're there. So that I believe that in order for us to do our job, to have this mentality of being felt when needed, but not seen. That's what I used to teach the people that I work with all the time. So, that's how you use diplomacy. There is an ego involved in it too, like you said. People with law enforcement, and specifically, sometimes they receive this authority to have a badge, and they feel empowered by it. And I think that sometimes sets us up for failure when we think like that. So to be able to de-escalate things, to be able to have these discussions, to be able to be felt when needed and just not seen is just the best way to operate. And then you can accomplish way more.
I think about diplomatic skills in general, and sure, you learn the basics when you join the diplomatic service. They give you an introductory training, but so much of it, the good stuff, is when you're out there doing the role. You learn from watching and observing and doing. Where do you feel you learned your best skills? Was it your basic training, or was it out in the field and sort of apprenticing yourself to inspiring people around you?
Training teaches us the policies, the procedures, the skills, the techniques that we use. You can walk through the door and already be mature, because emotional maturity matters in all this. And then as you go forward, if you are around people that behave in the bullyish manner before, you will probably embrace that, especially if you do something and you get away with it. That just reinforces that you can do it again and just get away with it until you don't. There is a need for action and for violence unnecessary, but the diplomacy part that we're talking about is learned with experience, and it's learned by interacting with a lot of people. And I think with traveling overseas, I've been to, we counted, it was like 80 something countries, my wife and I. And in those travels, there's a lot of language barriers. You can't just go in and demand things. Sometimes there's no language barriers. Sometimes having no language barrier and both speaking English, there is a cultural difference that is learned by experience. This repetitive approach to how we conduct our operations and the planning for all those operations. The planning phase is usually where you get to do that. You get to travel to these countries all over the world and interact with people in Asia, Japan, South Africa, Ecuador.
Yeah.
And all those cultures are different. And the more that you're exposed to that, and the more that you have people that guide you, don't forget what our goal is. And we don't want to have our egos get in the way where it's like, this person's not giving me this, right? And it's okay, you're not the significant one here. I believe that a lot of times that where we can't reach this middle ground, which is usually what it is. It's not just in Secret Service world, but the business world, the political world, everything. You have negotiations, try to come to some agreement. Sometimes I get more, sometimes you get more. Sometimes I have to give you 80% and I get 20%. So 2 days later, and then I remind you, hey, Jen, remember when you ate the big piece of the steak? And then you're like, oh, okay. So all those places present their own set of unique challenges. The more experience they gain, the more confidence they gain in their abilities, the more they're able to talk their way out of it into whatever the goals
Yeah,
are.
that's so interesting. Cultural diplomacy. It's really understanding the person in front of you and reaching a consensus on an agreed outcome. So in your world, it would be that your person travels to wherever they're going safely and comes back safely, does all their meetings. So that is your ideal outcome, keeping your person alive. And it doesn't really matter, I suppose, how you get there. And as you say, there's no ego involved. That is your one outcome that everyone can rally around, and then you sort of work from there.
There is ego sometimes. Something happens and then you become human and that
Yeah.
human part of you takes over you. And it took me a while to learn that. I was a young kid. I'm still immature in my old age now, but it took me a while to learn. We're talking about leadership, right? And it's about you as the individual. You have to know yourself and be strong and build yourself up. Once you do that, as a leader, that can also empower someone else. I won't send a woman to places where the cultural significance of that is to put a woman in a position to negotiate doesn't help her, sets her up for failure. And we have all these other problems that we have to negotiate with because there are different cultures that value one versus the other. And that is very difficult sometimes because we believe certain things. And the West in general has a certain culture. And as you go to different parts of the world, it is different. We have to recognize that and to set our people up for success and make sure that we're not setting them up for failure. As an individual, you can look at yourself in the mirror and not want to admit the truth. What you might find distasteful in one culture, they see it as normal.
Yeah.
These are truths that we should be aware of. And if we're already aware of them and we ignore them, and I send you somewhere that they're not going to receive you well. I set you up for failure, but then I say, well, they should allow Jen to negotiate. I don't understand what the problem is. Well, the problem is these cultural differences. The
Yeah.
truth is we're on their land.
Exactly. And it's
We're in
not your
their
job
world.
to change them.
That's not diplomacy. These truths are ignored more often than you think by not just the service, but everywhere. We have to be able to tell ourselves the truth.
So you've had leadership positions, and I know really want to talk about, you've got some really amazing leadership insights and perspectives from your time. Part of it as a leader is directive, right? You know, this is the goal, this is what needs to happen. But in order to make a really informed decision, use that example of let's send Jen to somewhere where women wouldn't necessarily have the same kind of negotiating capital as men might. By the sounds of it, you would welcome challenge in announcing that decision or that idea, right? The best kinds of meetings in terms of planning where this is the goal and you have a discussion about the achievement of that goal and welcome challenge.
And sometimes perhaps the authority figure, the supervisor, or whatever figure that is, we might not be briefed up on all the information. At some point, we have to make a decision, regardless of what information. When I trained with a lot of military units. One of the units, one of the units I trained was with the Marine Corps, and they had this 70% rule. And if you feel confident, 70% confident that your decision is based off of the facts that you have, will be successful, then let's start executing it. We can troubleshoot all the rest of the stuff as we go, because at some point we have to initiate action. We can't just sit on our hands. So there is that balance of the right amount of information. Let me set my team up for success. This is our goal. Let me define it. And we have as many facts and the truth as we can. All right, now we begin to execute our task. And then you troubleshoot it. And when somebody comes to you and says, hey, this is a giant obstacle, I don't know how we're going to do it, we troubleshoot that. Maybe the supervisor has to step in, or maybe I have to assign a second person, or maybe we ignore whatever the case might be. So
at what point, though? I mean, I saw this in the diplomatic world, right? most leaders or managers in peacetime, I use that awful phrase, prefer leading by consensus. As you say, making informed decisions. And sometimes they didn't even want to make decisions, but making informed decisions, allowing for challenge. Everyone's happy. They felt that they fed into the ultimate decision or the paper they were writing. But when we got to crisis situations, and you'll know this, right? You have to flex as a leader. You can't spend all the time chatting and getting everyone's opinion on a decision. Because things are happening very fast, people's lives might be at risk, and if you don't start making quite directive instructions and, becoming almost like I'm doing it now. Look, I don't know if you do that, the military chop, you start being much more decisive and much more directive. And I found different fellow colleagues were quite uncomfortable at flexing to that different style of leadership depending on the circumstances. So that was a very long introduction to my question. Like, at what point do you flex as a kind of team leader in a close protection situation from the planning, I really need everyone's information and everyone's additional perspectives to make this the best plan and make a decision, through to, right, execute, I'm in charge, I'm not putting up with any of your objections stage?
For me, the crisis situations are I take the initial response to the crisis, I absorb the responsibility and take that initial response. I take the decision making, I minimize it as much. So I deploy everyone as quick as possible based off of something we're dependable and reliable to each other. And I take that decision making out. Right? I want them to be in position. I put them in position immediately so that they can succeed. And then they can adjust afterwards. But I want to minimize, they're looking to me to make the decision because I have the authority right there. Unless it's something we're talking about, some physical confrontation that's right in front of the person. But in a crisis, it's these decisions are already pre-established.
Okay.
Best people in military operations, whether it's a direct action or if it's like a hostage rescue or whatever the case might be, there's a lot of decisions and planning that have been made in advance, way before even that operation. It's like, hey, Jen, this is the way that we're going to enter that room, you and I, and we're going to do it the way, no matter what. I want to minimize your initial response to it. I want to just get you out there as quick as possible, set you up for success. I absorb all the responsibility because and if they trust, then they adjust as they go. And then as we go after that initial barrage, we can kind of reestablish ourselves and maybe adjust and reorient ourselves. So that is the difference between the execution of some kind of crisis versus the planning phase, like leading up to it. And the planning phase leading up to it, the most dangerous people, I believe, are people who plan logistics, administrative items way before anything happens. And there's a quote by it, right? Yeah.
So what do you mean, though?
Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. And if you just, all you do is you practice martial arts and you shoot your gun and you run and you do all this stuff, you'll be formidable up to a certain point. Real people, the most dangerous people, the people that can execute a task are the ones that have been planning all. They plan logistics, how to move parts, how to move people, how to close things off, how to make sure that nobody can follow us, how to open up doors, how to do all this stuff. They plan in advance. All that stuff occurs organically. Respond in a crisis the way you're going to respond. If you have vision, whether it's you have a month to plan, a week to plan, a day to plan, an hour to plan, 10 minutes to plan, the more time that you spend revising your plan and doing logistics, you become infinitely more capable. And especially when you have other people with you. If it's yourself, you still are capable. If you're doing it with a team and you have mutual trust, even more capable. But that is where you make your money, in all the planning that leads up to it, whether it's the planning of the tactics, the planning of the administration, the planning of the logistics, or the planning of protocol. Right. And in our world, going into all these government facilities all around the world, there is a lot of protocol that we have to know and understand. If you have a dignitary that goes to some palace somewhere, you have to have that protocol. You understand that protocol, and then you plan around it.
Yeah.
They have to get out. They're going to move from A to B. They're going to meet the greeters. They're going to high five each other, whatever, right?
They're going to be exposed as they come out the front door. What am I going to do to?
And if you know all that, you can plan for it. And that's not going to show up and say like, well, we have more guns and people. We'll be fine.
I mean, as Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So how do you prepare for the unexpected, the unpredictable things going sideways.
Experience comes in, and just to have resolve. Some of it is discipline. You have to have discipline in what you're doing. If you get punched in the face, you can't just completely abandon your plan. Maybe you've just been taken back. But then there is the after the initial crisis begins, you have to be able to adjust. And that falls on the individual, but it falls more so on the leader that's there,
Yeah.
falls more so on the whoever's in charge, the supervisor.
Yeah.
So I would say that is true. I love Mike Tyson.
Gosh, where do we go? What's the most surreal moment you've had on the job?
There's been a lot. I'm trying to
Or
pick
what's one
one.
that you can share?
Surreal, like while I'm working, or surreal where I can't believe that this crazy thing is happening to me. Uh, the first time I traveled overseas, that was surreal to me because my first overseas trip ever in 2002 or 3 was to Africa.
Mm.
So as a kid growing up in the New York tri-state area, not traveling the world, and then going to Africa, it was just a whole new experience for me. And those were my favorite trips, to go to Africa, because I saw some great things, not some great things sometimes, but it gave me perspective and appreciation and a whole bunch of things, not just for the places that I visited, but also home, right? The things that they have that we didn't, or the things that that we have that they didn't. Both, it worked both ways. All those experiences are surreal. There's been some times where I had a itchy trigger finger, right? And those are surreal situations. But I think more so after a while, after stuff like that happened, it was more the new places that we were in, standing in places that I've never seen before. That was my favorite part, just traveling. And being on the counter assault team, we always went early and left late. We would get there to the countries early so we'd have some time to take in everything we're doing. So we travel and go out of our way to see, I don't know, I'm trying to think, Petra in Jordan. If
Amazing.
you've ever been, you go down and see Petra. That was surreal to me. And then trying to think of right now, off the top of my head, just being in Africa after a civil war, and
Mm.
just seeing all the infrastructure and the bullet holes riddled everywhere and how
Yeah.
they're rebuilding it. That's surreal. And things like that, I think they change you if you have humility and you're not just sitting there and be like, oh, everything that we do is the best. Look at this. Those things change you and give you appreciation for just humanity, because we fall into those conflicts sometimes, but also we find our way out of it. I'm very anti-war. So I don't like conflict of any kind. It really bothers me. I had a lot of friends that passed away overseas, that died overseas. So those experiences, I remember them today. As I'm telling you this, there's a painting that I got in one of my trips from Africa. It's right over there, over my over the computer, and it was still wet when I went into the hut. So these kids, they were selling a bunch of ivory and ebony and stuff. So there's a bunch of the guys that I was with, and they were looking to buy whatever. I see this painting, and they just painted it. It's wet. It's fairly large. It's a big painting. It's beautiful. It's watercolors, and it's women, and they're carrying a baby, and it's just what you would imagine Africa would be like if you went and you saw it. And I loved it so much, and I asked how much, and the kid looks at me and he says $1,000. I was like, oh, okay, and I just said, I'll give you $50, and the kid says, okay. And I was like, they just like the thing is right, and I gave him, because when we traveled, you get per diem, so it didn't matter. I gave him 100, and it was for making me laugh, and he loved it. He took it down. I had to dry, so I
Yeah.
brought it back to the embassy, and I just left it in the corner, and I had to dry for a couple of days, and I rolled it up and brought it home, and it's on my wall ever since.
You look at it, you remember the story and
I
where you
remember
were.
this laugh because all I remember is the kid who was just trying to earn money so they had something
Yeah.
to eat. And those are you find these little gems when you go places where it reminds me of my travels. It reminds me of being in places where, regardless of how war torn it might be, there's goodness and humanity.
Yeah, isn't it? And that's the beauty of when you talk about having a different perspective, it's that as well. It's seeing the humanity in everything and remembering that everyone's just human and they've got their own stresses and strains and objectives and goals and ambitions, even if how they're going about it might be a little uncomfortable sometimes. You've been around a lot of well-known leaders. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to name them. I suppose everyone can probably guess. But question I want to ask now, what have been the best lessons you've learnt from the political leaders you've been around, if any?
That they are all human. After a certain point, when I first started, it's nice to meet all the presidents. It's nice to meet all the foreign heads of state. It's nice to meet all these special assignments that we would get. In meeting them, if you put somebody up on a pedestal and you see them, you can never achieve what they achieve. You can never be like them. So in all of these people that I've met, at a certain point, they just became human like me, especially when I saw them when they weren't in front of a camera. And that gave me the realization that they work to get where they are. Political affiliations aside, because a lot of people will ask me about political affiliations, and I've become very apolitical as at this point in my life. All the things that I see, I'm very apolitical. I do see whether somebody is good or not, and I do see whether somebody has good intentions or bad intentions, or self-serving intentions, or whatever the case might be. In the end, they're all people, just like you and I. They have their own agendas. They have the agendas of all of us. They have both, right? It could be both, just like we do. And like we're on this podcast. I hope people listen. I hope people listen to you and subscribe to you and say,
Right.
Jen is the best. We love Jen, right? Like, and I hope that happens. But the fact that they're human, it allowed for me. Now when I meet people, there's very few people that I want to meet that I would be starstruck. And it's because I believe that we're all human. And I love being around like good people. I get excited. I start talking about it and I tell stories. But at the same time, that's what gave me. So we give some people too much credit sometimes. This isn't like the recent politics. This is all politics, all politicians. Sometimes they'd stop and they'd talk. I was on, again, special operations. I didn't stand right next to a lot of people. Towards the end, I did, because I started working as a leader and a detail leader and shift leader. So I was around them closer, and then I'd have a little bit more intimate relationships with them. But even that, I was just always, they'd call me Mr. John, or maybe they call me John, but I was always, yes, sir, no, sir. I just kept it at that because my job was a job. It wasn't to be friends with the person. I just would get to know them as we went forward. I know, oh, this guy likes chocolate. This guy, whatever the case might be. And the fact that they are human, I wrote about this. We can go back thousands and thousands of years and pick out these great military leaders, these great people in history, these philosophers, and they all started off by just being human. And when they studied each other, if you studied Plato or Aristotle or Socrates, right, Nietzsche, they studied each other, right, study politicians and see what they're good at. But they didn't try to be Plato didn't try to be somebody before him. So when Hannibal was trying to conquer Rome, he studied Alexander. He didn't try to be Alexander. He studied him, and then he became his own person, became Hannibal. I believe that in life you should be the same way, because the second that we emulate somebody, or even if you go to school, this is what I tell people that have degrees and higher degrees in somebody else's philosophy. Is like, you got a degree in somebody else's philosophy. Make sure that it's yours and you have your own philosophy. You have Jen Upton's philosophy. To study everybody is great, and to be around everybody is great. It's a privilege, right? Sometimes they're funny. They fall down too. They do a whole bunch of stuff, and then they look at you, and you're like, I don't know what to tell you.
So interesting about having your own philosophy. I really struggled when I left government because I was so busy articulating an opinion that was never my own. I stopped having an opinion almost. I was always there representing the UK government, and so therefore delivering the UK government's perspective on everything, to the point where when I left, I worked for about 2 years now to develop what I think about things and find the courage just to say what I think, as opposed to diplomat Jen or, UK representative Jen.
Government presents its challenges. If you want to speak your mind, sometimes
You don't.
but we have to use diplomacy, right? And that's the kind of the
Yeah.
definition that we're in the government.
Yeah.
But behind closed doors, we can be a
Yeah.
little forthright, especially in this line of work.
So in your retirement, you are writing or finishing your book on leadership?
The book is pretty much done. I'm going through it now. I'm editing. The book is it's my version of leadership. In order for you to be a good leader, you have to be a strong person. Strong equates with having some sense of morality, having a moral compass and being able to navigate pitfalls as they come up. And sometimes the pitfall is what reveals the truth to ourselves because we're lying to ourselves, because we're acquiescing to something that is not our own. We're acquiescing to some kind of culture that is not our own culture, and we're compromising our personal values. And you do that, you're not going to be as an effective leader as if you did have that morality and diplomacy for able to
Mm.
navigate these minefields. And that makes you unique. So the book is how you fall into that trap and then how you can pull yourself out of it. And I'll self admit that at some point I was immature and I was brash and I was young and I did a bunch of stupid things, which is a lot of knuckle draggers that are my line of work and I had to figure out, am I going to be mature? Am I going to be a leader of men and women in this agency and in this world? Or do I just acquiesce? And I think that gives you the ability, that freedom to believe and to see the things that you want to.
Was there a particular event or events that brought you to that realization that you need to mature?
There's stuff in the book that to it. I don't get into the specifics of it. In law enforcement and military, specifically those two, there's a lot of studies that show that our lifespans are inherently shorter than the civilian population.
Yeah.
So a lot of it has to do with your identity being removed from you. You identified as is whatever the job that you did. I identified as
Mhm.
this job that I did, special operations specifically. It was part of my identity. So
Mm.
I was lucky that I had to deal with that identity crisis before I even got to this point. The two things that are the biggest killers is some kind of cardiovascular episode, or even worse, depression and suicide. One of the studies that I read had most people in military and law enforcement, when they sever, the ones that commit suicide, 40% of those suicides occur within the first year of separation from their agency. That's almost one in two people who commit suicide are doing it within a year. And to me, that's unacceptable. Unacceptable, right? We can't have that. We
Mm.
need to have a way to have these people understand that these jobs are not their identities. The
Mm.
goodness is in Jen Upton. The goodness is in John Constantine. It's not his job didn't define you. You define you. So my version of leadership is to make you strong, for you to tell yourself the truths,
Yeah.
make you strong where your identity is you that nobody can ever take away from you, not a job or a badge or a position that somebody can take away from you or that can be taken away from you or that you take away from yourself by retiring. And in order for you to do that, you need to build your self-worth. And that is something that's lacking in a lot of these environments because we want to succeed. And that's the kind of the whole nexus of what happened. And for me, I had to go through it early. So much about my story as it is my examples, and there's stories of a whole bunch of other people. None of these concepts that are in the book are new. Right? I'm not the first person in history to ever come up with this stuff. There's a lot of research that's involved. I've been doing this for years now, and I believe that if you focus on you, build up your self-worth, whether you succeed or not, it's not going to matter to you because you will believe in yourself. And I also will argue that if you do the right things and you build up your self-worth and you become excellent at your job, if you're excellent at your job, you will be successful. But focus on that excellence. Don't focus on the end product. So that I emphasize that all
And
the
the
time.
external validation, I'm guessing. I had my own kind of existential moment like that not that long ago, and it was one of the precipitating, if not the only precipitating reason I left diplomacy. There's lots of reasons, but one was I realized my whole self-worth and identity was caught up in people saying, "Ooh," when I said I was a diplomat, not I'm Jennifer Upton, this is what I stand for. But people were introduced to me and say, "Oh, she's a diplomat," and everyone would go, "Oh," and they'd suddenly be more interested in me just by inherently my job title. That feels really unhealthy to me that I only matter to people because of my job and who I work for. I want to matter for what I do as a person and who I stand for as a person.
We become blind to that kind of external feedback.
Yeah,
We believe that's what validates us, and we eat it up and we look
yeah,
for it instead of somebody says you were in Secret Service. I'm like, yeah, I was. Right. And then they'll
yeah,
ask me questions and they'll ask me like, oh, I was Obama, I was Trump, I was
yeah,
Biden.
yeah,
And I'll just tell them funny stories from all of them. And I tell everybody this. They ask me about all the presidents, and I'd say like the sanctity of my position is that I will never disparage
yeah.
any, and it was my privilege to be able to say that because of who I was around. I'll tell you funny stories, right? I believe that that's something that A lot of organizations try and help their people, and a lot of organizations don't realize how much that's affecting their people. For you, everybody has their moment. Everybody has that moment that you everybody has it. You choose whether to continue down that path that you've been going or to alter your behavior and to alter yourself because you think that for some reason this thing. Be good, be ambitious, endeavor towards excellence, but we have to separate those two. That identity that you think is you, whether it's you're the CEO of a company, that to be that CEO is everything, or to be a Secret Service agent, or to be a diplomat, or to be an athlete, or to be whatever whatever it is. Those two things are different. Instead, if you had courage, you were good, and people loved you because you were good. And in the end, it's how you make people feel, as Viktor Frankl says, right? Like it's actually he says people remember you for how you made them feel, not for what you did. It uses this example too all the time. Like, so take your last four people in your position before you. Can you name them all easily off the top of your head? Can you name the ones that were your friend? Can you name the ones that you remember them because they taught you something or they took you out, right? Because nobody cares what you did in the end. Right? When we leave this earth, nobody cares. But they will remember you for saying like, hey man, John took care of me and he loved me and he protected me. Take that and push it forward. And then be great at your job. And then once you have that mentality where you're not a threat to me, I'm not a threat to you, we're all in this together. And it's like, I have my freedom to believe what I want. You can accomplish a lot. I wrote a book. If I can write a book, anybody can write a book, right? that's like
You're going to call it. Where can the listeners get a hold of it?
It's not going to be out for some time. Not
You've
some
got
time.
to, you've got to get out.
I have to publish it and stuff. But just follow John Constantine. You'll see me on the website. It's in the final stages.
Okay. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that conversation. As ever, I find myself walking away learning lots about life, I think, and myself every time.
Oh, we have great conversations.
We do. Well, you can tell why John was such a respected leader in the Secret Service. Yes, he's calm under pressure. Yes, he's trained in things most of us will likely only see in the movies. But what struck me most was his clarity, his inner clarity. This is someone who truly believes that amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, who leads not with ego but with preparation, whose priority is to set his team up for success, who plans for things to go wrong because that's what real leadership demands, and who sees the people he's protecting not as VIPs on paper but as humans, real humans, right? Quirks, habits, fears, and all of that stuff. John and I both came of age in a world that was shaped by 9/11. It was a time when power often looked like control and dominance, when it felt that there was little room for nuance. You're either with us or you're against us. But we both walked away believing something different, that real leadership isn't about taking sides. It's about holding space for complexity. We're human beings, we're complex. We're not one thing or the other. And it's about listening when others rush to speak and finding consensus when others choose division. That's diplomacy, and it's needed now more than ever. The best leaders train their teams, empower them, trust them, and then just get out of the way until they're needed. The British Army calls it serve to lead, and to me it means understanding that leadership isn't the badge or the title. It's about who you are when everything's on the line, who you are for your team, and who you are when the mission is over. John also spoke with rare honesty about what it's like to leave a role that's defined you, to hang up the badge and ask, well, who am I now? And that's a question more and more of us are facing in our careers, in all walks of life. And my takeaway from his answer was stay grounded, stay curious, stay kind, both to yourself and to people around you. Thank you so much for listening to How to Diplomat. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And if it sparked something, anything, drop me a message at jennifer@howtodiplomat.com. Whether it's a question about the interview, the Secret Service, or diplomacy in real life, I'd love to hear from you and hopefully answer your questions in a future pod.